Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well. I decided to move away from the ocean because basically it was making way too much noise. I mean, the ocean has its own symphony orchestra and it's a full house right now. Um, I haven't made a video in like 3 days because the last 72 hours were just insane. Absolutely, completely insane. There isn't really any other words to describe it. Um, Basically, the last video that I made was that I unfortunately couldn't upload because of the audio quality. Um, was really about the ceasefire and celebrating the ceasefire. I was absolutely ecstatic. I was absolutely ecstatic about the ceasefire. And, like the news was broken by Al Jazeera, and the supposed ceasefire was brokered by Qatar. So you kind of assumed that basically, and it was the chief diplomatic correspondent who broke the news, I think. So it really looked like it had legs, but unfortunately, it was a ruse. The entire thing was just basically a giant ruse by the Zionists. Um, Basically, after the news of the ceasefire broke, there was heavy bombardment. And initially, my thoughts were that the bombardment was because basically the ceasefire was going to come into effect, and they were trying to eliminate as many targets on the list as they possibly could before it took effect. Um, no, that was not the case at all. The bombardments were absolutely relentless. They're unlike anything I've ever seen before, and I think unlike anything most people have seen before, especially the people of Gaza. And basically, what the situation is right now is that the massive bombardment was basically a precursor for the ground invasion, and you have absolute tanks. Like yesterday, there were tanks basically being recorded that was firing on civilian vehicles as they were fleeing. Yesterday, they were showing cars of civilians that were basically trying to flee as the tanks rolled in because the bombardment was a precursor for the ground invasion. And essentially, what you had was live videos of basically tanks firing on civilian vehicles as they were trying to flee. And at this point, and what you had were the massive bombardment was a precursor for the ground invasion. And what you had yesterday were basically live videos. I'm not sure if they were live, but there were videos showing tanks point blank firing at civilian vehicles as civilians were basically trying to flee. So war crimes or no war crimes, this is like that doesn't even come into come to have any meaning anymore. And yeah, so what we had is that as far as the war is concerned, Gaza is a graveyard. Um, you just simply could not believe the bombardment. I mean, the bombardment was absolutely out of this world. They said about a few weeks ago, I'm not sure if it's been a week or 2 weeks by now, but essentially what you had is the IDF coming out saying that they have dropped some some what you had was the IDF what you had was the IDF coming out to say that they have dropped some 6,000 tons of ammunition, basically bombs, into Gaza, and what that equates to is a quarter of a ton, the quarter mass of a what you had was the IDF coming out and saying that they had last week, I think it was, that they dropped some 6,000 tons of bombs in basically in Gaza, and what that equates to is about a quarter of a nuclear bomb. And if you add the bombardments, the bombs that they've basically dropped in the last 72 hours, I think maybe you're looking at something close to half, if not half. And we're talking about civilians who have no means of defending themselves. And I think Gaza is going to go down in history as basically flashing red lights that brought everything that democracy stands for, that brought everything that liberty stands for, absolutely everything that the post World War II world stood for. I think that's pretty clear. There's absolutely nothing that anyone who can argue that somehow thinks like the world that is supposedly built after World War II, with its human rights and so on. It's simple. All you need to point is to Gaza to just basically say that, I'm sorry, none of that flies. And so as far as the war is concerned, it's that. Now, I said I don't really want to mention their names, but I don't know how we can avoid it. Essentially, what you had were in Lebanon, and what you had in Lebanon was Nasrallah firing. Nasrallah basically came out with a video of him walking past the Hezbollah logo on the wall somewhere, and apparently he's gonna be making a speech. Yeah, he's gonna be making a speech, and you know, after 10,000 lives lost, and after a month of basically watching Gaza and the civilians being killed, I'm not really sure what the relevance of the speech is, but apparently there's going to be a speech on Friday, and we will just have to wait and see what exactly he's going to say on that speech. I have really hypothesized as to exactly what the scenario is, what the reason is that has kept Hezbollah out of the situation at the moment as it is. I don't know. I think it kind of feels like they were waiting to see what was going to happen, who was going to act first, and I don't know. Maybe the Iranians were sort of trying to show to the Arabs that how worthless they are. This is pure speculation on my part, because it's going like I'm trying to formulate what I'm thinking, and that is they went into the attack together. Hezbollah was basically behind it. Persia was behind it. They facilitated the initial attack on the 7th of October. But other than basically missiles being hurled from southern Lebanon into Zionist military facilities that are unoccupied antennas, military antennas, and so on. And I know they lost some fighters. They have actually lost some fighters, but it's nowhere near the intensity of the fighting. It's nowhere near the level it is in Gaza. It kind of seems like it's half-baked. It's really a half-baked effort, and it doesn't really, and to the point where Hamas actually had to go to them and say, "Can you please be more active? We need you to be more active." And once the ground invasion happened, I don't know why you would wait a week to make a speech. I don't really know what the scenarios behind that are, but I think the point is that basically Nasrallah is going to be making a speech, and in that speech, nobody really knows what he's going to say. Obviously, it's going to be an enormous anticlimax if he does not declare war. It's going to be just a massive, massive anticlimax if he does not basically declare war. It's been a month, it's almost a month since the attacks took place, and 10,000 lives have been lost on our side, and it's really interesting what the losses are on their side, because you had like 1,400 deaths initially, and then this entire time they've been engaged in military activity, but obviously for political reasons the IDF does not want to say how many soldiers were lost during the battles and so on, because of the domestic pressure. They're already under domestic pressure because of the families of the hostages. So the fact that Hezbollah took some 40 losses, I imagine they're probably a lot more by now. But the IDF hasn't really made any announcements to say that these are the number of soldiers that we had lost, so on and so forth. It's really quite interesting, um, particularly for a democracy, supposed democracy. So as far as the Lebanon is concerned, there hasn't really been anything noteworthy to speak of. There hasn't really been anything noteworthy to speak of. And you wonder whether that is because the Americans gave them both by basically putting the two strike groups with their aircraft carriers. But of course they have to have expected that. I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine a scenario in which they basically thought the Yankees were gonna sit this one out. I don't know how. I don't think they saw that. So the fact that you have, maybe they didn't expect the aircraft carriers. Maybe that's true. That reaction was a bit strong. It really reminded me of 1996 incident on the Taiwan Strait. If you recall, Jiang Zemin, who was the predecessor to Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping's predecessor, basically all the Chinese have this, like the communist era. I think the way to prove you're a great leader is just to basically say, I'm going to reunify the country. And that is the last island that's missing, the last territory that's missing from China. Basically to bring an end to the center of humiliation, because the center of humiliation cannot formally be brought to an end while basically China is still disunited, geographically speaking. And the mark of a great leader, and that's really what the Chinese are all about. They're all about legacy. They're all about, like, basically, because they know poems are going to be written. They know that basically, the folklore is going to be in full effect. And I imagine the propaganda, that leader would have really grounds to make himself immortal, the same way Mao has basically made himself immortal. And what Jiang Zemin did in 1996 was basically he carried out massive military exercise and naval exercise around the Taiwan Strait, and to basically kind of try, I don't think it was an invasion, but basically it was to try and, rape a saddle a little bit. And Clinton, who was the president at the time, sent an aircraft carrier. And the Chinese didn't really pay any attention to it, but he put in a second aircraft carrier. And when he put in a second aircraft carrier, then basically the Chinese, Jiang Zemin was humiliated, and he just basically had to go back to Beijing with his, tail tucked between his legs. So his chance of reuniting Taiwan and achieving greatness basically died there. And And then who else tried it? Well, Xi Jinping is really making an effort, but who knows how that is going to work. Essentially, the point is that basically 2 aircraft carriers are enough to obliterate Beirut. You know, not that there's much left of Beirut after that huge port blast, but it's enough to give them pause. And I can understand why it gave them pause. But at the end of the day, it's really difficult to foresee a scenario in which the Americans are willing to come back into Arabia, spend another $6 trillion, which they don't have. And, you know, it's really difficult to see that scenario. I don't know if they would do that. I don't really know if they would do that. And even if they did that, what does that mean for Europe? What does that mean for Article 5? What does that mean for the defense agreement with Taiwan? What does that mean for Japan? What does that mean for Korea? You know, so Kiev had the first. So basically, it's really difficult to see a scenario in which America is going to forsake Japan. I think it would forsake a lot of others for Israel. I think it would. But I think the notion of forsaking Japan is going to have such profound implications that I don't know if America is really wholeheartedly committed to basically doing a grand invasion, because, you know, basically Putin has already played his card, and it looks like Ayatollah is playing his card. So it's only Xi Jinping that has to play his hand as far as the alliance is concerned, the entente, if you want to call it, between Moscow, Tehran, and Beijing. So it kind of reminded me of that once they put those 2 aircraft carriers there. And at the end of the day, basically, Hezbollah has put its neck out there and its reputation is on the line. I really don't know if they, like on Friday, if they're not going to declare war. Somehow it seemed like they were really, in my mind, when I because the only thing I do is just basically go to Twitter and just hashtag Hezbollah. I don't really do hashtag Gaza. I don't really do anything out of those lines, because once the war is declared and once action actually takes, it's careless. I know it sounds careless, but at the end of the day, basically casualties are an afterthought. As difficult as it is to say that, because there's really nothing you can do. At the end of the day, what matters is how is the war going to turn out. How is the war going to turn out? And as soon as I get into it, the first thing I do in the morning is just grab my phone and hashtag Hezbollah to see what has happened. Are the Palestinians still fighting on their own, or is there something happening? And every day when you just check and you realize nothing is happening, it's just a few other missiles that have been thrown into northern Israel, basically to eliminate like antennas, right? It's really frustrating. And once you kind of sit back and try to analyze why it is that Hezbollah has not acted yet, you can come to one of 2 conclusions. One is that basically, as I said, the aircraft carriers gave them balls, that they were not expecting that degree of reaction from the Americans. And the other one, I think, is to basically, for Hezbollah, and the Persian is to become for the Arabs what they have become for the Shia Lebanese. And that is to say, we're going to sit back for a little while and we're going to watch and we're going to see who reacts and what the reaction is. We're going to see who reacts diplomatically. If there are any ambassadors that have been summoned, any ambassadors that have been basically told to pack their bags and, you know, go back home. If any embassies and diplomatic relations were broken by any of the Arabs. If the Arabs took any action, and I shouldn't really say the Arabs. I think I should say the Najdis. I should be very, very specific. I should say the Najdis. And nothing happened. Not even Erdogan summoned the Israeli ambassador, to my knowledge, let alone send him home. You know, I know they evacuated their. They basically told their staff not to come to work, but I don't know if they actually evacuated the embassy itself. Um, so, and at this point, I think if that was the point to show to the Arabs that you have no other hope but the Persians and Hezbollah, you have no other hope but the Persians and Hezbollah, then well done. I think that point has pretty much been made. I think we've seen what the Najdis are, and we didn't really need that point to be proven, because if you recall, the Prophet ﷺ, I think in a hadith, said that the fitna was going to come from Al-Najd, you know. So as far as the Persians and everything is concerned and Hezbollah are concerned, there isn't anything to be expected until Friday. So it's a wait and see. It's really, really a wait and see. Speaking of the Najd, let's focus on the Najd. It would almost be comical if it wasn't such a Greek tragedy. It really, really, really would be comical. It really, honestly, would be comical if it wasn't such a tragedy. There is a lovely video going around on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen, but there was a boxing match in Riyadh. I'm so glad it wasn't in Hijaz. I'm so glad that Shakira did not go to Hijaz. I'm so glad that none of them went to Hijaz. I'm truly, truly grateful for that. But yeah, so basically this weekend has been a very, very full on in Saudi Arabia. And as if to say that we don't care, and we're gonna show you that we don't care, and we're gonna rub it in your face that we don't care. It reminded me of that Melania Trump jacket, if anybody recalls, when she went to go see those poor immigrants, and then she wore that jacket like that, basically said, I don't really care, do you, or something along those lines. I felt like this weekend was basically MBS saying that to the Ummah. I don't really care, do you? Because they had some event happening, some festivals or something happening, and they brought in Shakira to perform in Riyadh. Shakira. I like Shakira, and Shakira is, by the way, a Colombian. And how awkward it must be for Shakira to be there. How awkward it must be, because all the way from the president, and you can go through social media, you can just see the Colombians, the comments coming out of Colombia, how absolutely annoyed they are, how angry they are, and how much they support the Palestinians. I'm talking about the president himself, all the way down to the normal people, the average person on the street. Like the Colombians have shown exactly how they feel, and they have shown it on social media, and they have shown it through their president and their political establishment. And we are so grateful to Colombia. We are so grateful to Bogota. We are truly, truly grateful to Bogota. So it's really hard for me to imagine that knowing basically the sentiment of the average Colombian, and Shakira is a Colombian that has supporters with Gaza. I don't want to speculate on exactly what her political views are, but at the end of the day, if we are to take everything that the Colombian president has said and everything we've seen from the Colombians as some sort of a barometer, we can kind of assume that is the national sentiment. And you know, Shakira is a businesswoman. as much as she is an artist, and I don't blame her for basically going to Saudi Arabia and doing what she did. I'm just glad, as I said, that it wasn't in Hijaz. That's the only saving grace, really. But how awkward it must be to actually have Shakira perform there. And who knows, Shakira probably, who knows what's in her heart, but she probably supports Gaza. She probably supports Gaza and is just looking at this guy like some sort of a, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, where's the check? Where's the check? So they had that, and they had, I think, a boxing that I know they did. They had a boxing match of the Gypsy King, I think he calls himself, Tyson Fury, and some African guy. I don't really know him. I haven't heard of him before. I know Fury because of his fights with Wilder, but I haven't heard of the other guy, the African guy, before. Anyway, his last name sounds very African. So yeah, that was that fine. And if there was a video going around of a brother who brought the Palestinian flag to the match, and he took out the Palestinian flag, and he was escorted out by security. You know. Ooh, 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 ooh. Oh my word, there's something on my face. He was escorted out by security, and he recorded it. Good on him. Thank you, brother. He recorded it, and he said something. What he said was really beautiful. He was speaking in a British accent, so he was sort of like, yeah, basically explaining it. I showed this flag and I was escorted out, and he was saying, don't ever let anybody hold you down or giving advice to it. I hope he's okay. I hope he's okay. So as far as the Najdis are concerned, that is basically the state of play right now. Gaza is burning and Shakira is basically twerking in Riyadh. And it's so disgusting because you can definitely, you know, I cannot imagine Tyson Fury not supporting Gaza. I mean, Tyson Fury is a gypsy, you know. If anybody knows about modern day oppression, talk to the gypsies, you know, talk to the gypsies. I think the gypsies and the Gazans have a lot to relate to each other, the Palestinians, I should say. So that is that. As far as, anyway, whatever, there's no point in calling him names. And you know, Erdogan. Let's turn to Anatolia. Let's turn to the Ottomans. Should I call it that? The Ottomans. Basically in Turkey, I kind of feel sorry for Turkey because they're like, this is their centennial and they're celebrating basically 100 years since Atatürk founded Turkey, which is another way of saying we're celebrating 100, which is basically saying this is the 100th anniversary since the Caliph fell. Yeah. I know I'll go into a lot of side tangents, but this is going to be a quick one. Did you know that once Anfar Pasha, once Atatürk basically expelled the Caliph didn't even have any food to eat. Like, can you imagine? The Red Cross was basically feeding him. And the Red Cross actually published a letter, and I believe in newspapers, telling the Ummah, you need to take care of your Caliph. Because the guy didn't have anything. Yeah, like, he didn't have anything. It was a bit like what happened to the Romanovs. You know how, like, Olga Romanov, the Grand-Duchess Olga Romanov, basically died somewhere in Toronto, like above some sort of a salon, like in a one-bedroom, you know. And then you had like people like, what was his name? Grand Duke Michael, the one who basically, the coward, you know, the coward who basically brought down the Romanovs when he refused the army's offer to proclaim him, when he refused the crown essentially, after Nicholas abdicated and obviously Alexei could not take over. So the crown was offered to Mikhail, and Mikhail the coward absolutely refused it, and that's essentially how the Romanovs came to an end, because Mikhail could have basically saved them. The army was willing, the military was willing to back him, but they were not willing to back Nicholas. In any event, his wife ended up basically prostituting for bread in Paris. So those monarchs really went through a nightmare. And that's what happened to the caliph. Basically, the caliph was unfortunately forced to beg for food. He was forced to beg for food. Um, so yeah, that's a little interesting side note. So it's been 100 years, say, basically without a caliph, and look where we are. Look where we are. Thank you, Ataturk. May God judge you justly. So yeah, Turkey was celebrating its 100th anniversary, and basically Erdogan didn't really say anything. He banded to the crowd. The crowd was massive. He threw them red meat, as you would expect a politician to do. He threw them red meat. He made some threats. He called Israel some group or whatever that means. But at the end of the day, nothing beyond rhetoric, nothing beyond words. And as Lord Eddard Stark said, words are wind. Words are wind. So that's the state of play right now. Tanks are rolling through the streets of Gaza. Tanks are rolling through Saladin streets in Gaza, and there is nowhere to hide for the Gazans. There's just nowhere to hide for the Gazans. And I don't know if there's going to be anything that happens until Friday. I have no idea why he has to wait so long. The ground invasion happened. Why do you need a week? Just to make a speech? But I can only imagine, what a military commander's mind, what goes through a military commander's mind. So I'm not really in a position to criticize Hezbollah. But please do something. If the point was to prove that the Ummah has no hope other than you and few others, then, please do something. It's so annoying. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. It makes you so annoyed as to why on earth you chose a degree other than medical degree. If you could turn back the hands of time, man, I would even be a nurse. So frustrating. Oof. I need to get a hold of myself. It's so frustrating. It's really frustrating, because unless you have medical experience or military experience, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do at all. What they need are medical professionals and military personnel. What are you gonna do? Go to Gaza, somehow go to Beirut or something like that, make your way to southern Lebanon, and then you say, what are you gonna do? There's nothing you can do. And the only thing you can do is make some sort of a financial contribution, make some sort of a financial donation. And how impotent and weak does that make you feel? Just to go into some app, and just make some transfer. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. But but I'm pretty sure that the sentiment is, 1.8, 1.9, I think, billion people share this sentiment. And something's gonna happen. Even even if there is somehow some sort of a ceasefire. And I really, really, really hope that's not why Hezbollah has not acted. I really, really hope that they were not buying for time, like just to basically to have some sort of a ceasefire come into effect so that they would basically be preserved reputationally and capacity-wise. Because, you know, there's a great video actually. I have been listening to Shirvan for a long time. We've communicated by email several times. He's fantastic analyst, especially his earlier work. Shirvan Nifty from Caspian Report. There's a great video that he put out explaining why it is that Iran might be hesitant to use Hezbollah, because at the end of the day, Iran didn't create Hezbollah to assist the Palestinians. Hezbollah was basically founded as some sort of a protection force for the Shias who were suffering through the civil war, and basically for Iran itself, as some sort of an extension of the Revolutionary Guard. So if Hezbollah gets into the fight, Hezbollah is going to be diminished in one way or another. Obviously, Israel has already been diminished. It's just what happens when you go to war. You use your equipment, you use your ammunition, you use your stockpiles, and that diminishes your power. That's just something that's just a fact. And so he explained in detail why it is that Iran might be hesitant. Iran might be hesitant to use Hezbollah basically for this conflict, and it made sense. But at the end of the day, it's in it. Hezbollah basically is in it. So it certainly does not want to be diminished by reputation. Well, reputationally, it does not want to be diminished. So it's a wait and see what happens on Friday. It's a wait and see what happens on Friday. And that's really it. There isn't really anything else to report. And speaking of, Shirvan is from Azerbaijan. Shirvan is from Azerbaijan. And the only reason why those tanks in Gaza are able to move is because of Azerbaijani or fuel. Azerbaijan supplies fuel to the Israelis. And treason, high treason, absolutely high treason. So it's high treason. It's absolutely high treason. I hate this. Like I don't know. Something's up with like ex-communist Muslims. Like I don't know. Somehow something's up with ex-communist Muslims. It's disgusting to think that those jets that are flying to bomb Gaza, those tanks, all those armored vehicles are basically moving because of our oil, because of our energy, to kill us. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? In any event, I think there isn't anything to basically look forward to until Friday, until to see what finally Nasrallah comes out and says, and we'll see what goes forward from there. May God bless all those who died. May God grant them heaven, and may God preserve those who are still alive. God bless you all. Bye.